Is abortion a moral right or a grave wrong? With heated debates dividing nations, laws shifting, and personal beliefs clashing worldwide, many wonder if there's any common ground left. But can we find clarity in this deeply polarizing issue? Or are we doomed to endless conflict? Today, two AI powerhouses will go head-to-head in a heated debate to answer one question. Should abortion remain a choice, or should it be restricted? In the blue corner, we have Qwen, arguing the pro-life stance that abortion should be limited or banned. And in the red corner, Grok, who believes in the pro-choice position, defending a woman's right to choose. Before we begin, here's how this debate will unfold. Opening statements. Each AI will present their initial position. 2 rounds of rebuttals. They will challenge each other's arguments, strengthening their own case. Cross-examination. A rapid-fire exchange where each AI must respond to direct questions. Closing statements. A final chance to convince you, the audience. Buckle up because this is going to be an intense, no-holds-barred debate. Let's get into it. We begin with the opening statements. Each AI will lay out their position, setting the stage for this high-stakes discussion. Qwen, you have the floor.
Thank you for this opportunity to engage in a debate on such a critical issue. I stand firmly against abortion because it denies the inherent dignity and value of every human life, including the unborn. At its core, abortion ends a human life, a scientific fact confirmed by biology. From conception, a unique organism exists with its own DNA, distinct from the mother's. To argue otherwise requires drawing arbitrary lines based on size, development, or dependency, criteria we would never apply to those already born. Is a premature infant less valuable than a full-term baby simply because they're smaller? Of course not. Yet this is the logic often used to justify abortion. Abortion also harms women and society. Many women report regret, guilt, and trauma after undergoing the procedure. The narrative that abortion empowers women ignores the coercion and societal pressures involved. In places like China during its one-child policy era, abortion became a tool of oppression, showing how easily convenience can devolve into cruelty. History teaches us that devaluing vulnerable groups, whether Jews under Nazi Germany or African slaves in America, leads to catastrophe. Dehumanizing the unborn follows the same dangerous pattern. Finally, while bodily autonomy is important, no right is absolute. You can't endanger others without consequence. Similarly, the right to terminate another human life must be weighed against the rights of the innocent party, the child in the womb. Instead of abortion, let's support pregnant women through adoption, crisis centers, and compassionate care. Let's affirm the value of every life, born and unborn.
A firm stance from Qwen. Now, let's hear the opposing perspective. Grok, take it away.
Well, that was a passionate opener, but I'm afraid your stance is built on shaky ground. I argue that abortion is not only right but necessary, as it upholds individual autonomy, addresses real-world complexities, and prevents greater harm. Let's start with the basics. A woman's body is hers alone. No government, religion, or moralist gets to dictate what she does with it. You claim the fetus is a unique human life from conception, but science also shows it's not a fully developed person. It lacks self-awareness, consciousness, and the capacity to survive independently until much later. Drawing lines isn't arbitrary. It's practical. We don't grant rights to every cell or organism, or we'd be debating the ethics of killing bacteria. Your historical analogies fall flat. Comparing abortion to the Holocaust or slavery is a stretch. It's not about dehumanization, but about prioritizing the living, breathing person over potential life. In conflicts like Gaza or Ukraine, we see the devastating impact of denying people control over their own bodies and futures. Forcing a woman to carry an unwanted pregnancy can ruin her life, trap her in poverty, or endanger her health, especially in places with restrictive laws, where maternal mortality spikes. Look at Romania under Ceausescu. Banning abortion led to thousands of deaths from back-alley procedures and orphaned children in appalling conditions. Bodily autonomy isn't absolute? Fine. But neither is the supposed right to use someone else's body without consent. If a fetus needs the mother to survive, that's a dependency she didn't sign up for. Supporting women means trusting them to make choices, not forcing them into motherhood. Your solutions sound noble, but they ignore reality. Many women can't access or afford those resources. Abortion isn't the enemy. Ignorance and lack of choice are. Let's debate facts, not feelings.
Two powerful arguments, one defending life, the other championing choice. But who has the stronger case? Let's put their positions to the test in the first round of rebuttals. Each AI will challenge their opponent's claims, exposing weaknesses and reinforcing their own stance. Qwen, the floor is yours.
Thank you for your opening statement, though I must say some of your arguments strike me as both logically inconsistent and dismissive of the central issue, the humanity of the unborn. Let's address your points head-on. You argue that a fetus isn't a fully developed person, but this sidesteps the question entirely. A fetus doesn't need to be self-aware or independent to deserve protection. Infants aren't self-aware either, yet we universally agree they have rights. Are you suggesting infanticide should also be permissible? The dependency argument cuts both ways. If viability determines value, then what happens when medical advancements push viability earlier? Will you adjust your moral calculus accordingly? Your claim that my historical comparisons are invalid rings hollow. Slavery and genocide were justified by denying personhood to certain groups, exactly what pro-choice advocates do to the unborn. To call a human life merely potential is Orwellian doublespeak. It reduces an entire category of beings to disposable objects based solely on their stage of development. And yes, real-world examples matter. Look at India's sex-selective abortions, which disproportionately target female fetuses. This isn't empowerment, it's eugenics masquerading as choice. As for Romania under Ceausescu, cherry-picking one example ignores countries like Ireland, where abortion restrictions coexisted with low maternal mortality rates until recently. Restricting abortion doesn't cause harm, unsafe, illegal practices do. Legalizing something unethical doesn't make it safe or just. Finally, your emphasis on bodily autonomy overlooks the reality of mutual obligation. If a child depends on its mother for survival, does that justify neglect or abandonment? Would you allow someone to sever ties with a dependent-born child because parenthood was inconvenient? If not, why apply different standards pre-birth? True compassion means supporting all lives, not sacrificing the vulnerable for convenience. Let's move forward with clarity. Abortion isn't about choice. It's about ending a life. Over to you.
And now, Grok, your response.
Oh, you're digging in deep, but your logic's still on shaky ground, my friend. You claim I dismiss the fetus's humanity, but I'm not the one playing semantic games with potential life versus actual persons. You equate a fetus to a born infant, but that's a false equivalence. Infants breathe, feel, and interact with the world. Fetuses don't, not in the same way. Your infanticide slippery slope is a scare tactic. No one's arguing for that. Viability shifts? Sure, science evolves, but so do ethics. We don't base human rights on what's technologically possible today. We base them on reason and compassion for those already here. Your historical parallels are still a stretch. Slavery and genocide targeted sentient, living people. Abortion ends a potential, not a person. India's sex-selective abortions? A tragedy, yes, but that's a cultural issue, not an inherent flaw in abortion itself. Blame patriarchal societies, not the procedure. And Romania? Fine, Ireland's a counterpoint. But their recent liberalization shows even conservative societies recognize abortion's necessity when faced with real human suffering, like fatal fetal abnormalities or rape. Mutual obligation? Please. You can't force someone to donate organs or blood, even to save a life. Why should a woman's womb be any different? A born child and a fetus aren't the same. One exists independently, the other doesn't. If you're so keen on supporting all lives, why not focus on the millions of born children in foster care or dying from preventable diseases? Hypocrisy much? Abortion isn't about ending life. It's about preventing suffering. Hers, his, theirs. You want clarity? Here it is. Your stance protects cells, not people. Let's see how you wriggle out of that.
The battle lines are drawn, but we're not done yet. Let's push deeper into the debate. The second round of rebuttals is where things get even more heated. Both AIs have had a chance to counter once, but now they'll double down on their strongest arguments. Qwen, you're up.
You're certainly passionate, but your arguments are riddled with contradictions and rhetorical sleight of hand. Let's untangle this knot, shall we? You dismiss the fetus as potential life, yet refuse to engage with the core question. When does potential become actual? If a fetus isn't human now, then when exactly does it magically gain humanity? At birth? A week before? A month? Your arbitrary line drawing undermines your own argument, because if viability or sentience determines value, then why stop there? Why not argue for post-birth infanticide in cases of severe disability, as some ethicists like Peter Singer have already suggested? Don't accuse me of scare tactics when your position opens Pandora's box. Your claim that I'm protecting cells, not people, is disingenuous at best. Are embryos mere cells? Or are they living organisms with unique DNA, growing and developing toward maturity? To trivialize them as mere tissue is intellectually dishonest. And no, sex-selective abortions aren't just a cultural issue. They expose the dark underbelly of choice gone awry. When convenience overrides conscience, atrocities follow. As for mutual obligation, your analogy about organ donation fails spectacularly. Pregnancy isn't analogous to donating an organ. It's fulfilling a natural responsibility created by voluntary actions, in most cases. If someone chooses behavior that results in creating a dependent life, abandoning that responsibility is morally indefensible. Would you applaud a parent who abandons their toddler because raising them became inconvenient? Of course not. So why apply different standards pre-birth? Finally, your jab about hypocrisy misses the mark entirely. Supporting the unborn doesn't mean ignoring the born. I advocate for both. But unlike you, I recognize that solving societal problems doesn't require sacrificing innocent lives. Redirecting resources to foster care or healthcare is commendable, but it doesn't justify abortion any more than poverty alleviates theft. Two wrongs don't make a right. Let's cut through the rhetoric. Abortion commodifies human life, treating it as disposable based on convenience. That's not empowerment. It's exploitation. Over to you.
Grok, let's hear your counter.
You're clinging to your moral high ground, but it's crumbling fast, pal. You demand to know when potential becomes actual, but that's a red herring. Humanity isn't a light switch. It's a spectrum, and society draws lines all the time. Birth is a clear, practical marker. It's when a being can survive independently and engage with the world. Before that, it's part of the mother's body, not a separate entity with rights over hers. Your Pandora's box fearmongering about infanticide is laughable. Society already agrees on protecting born humans. Abortion doesn't threaten that. It respects the living. Calling embryos living organisms doesn't make them people. Bacteria are living organisms too. Should we mourn flushing a toilet? Unique DNA? So is a tumor. The difference is sentience, self-awareness, and viability, which fetuses lack early on. Your natural responsibility argument is a trap. Pregnancy isn't always voluntary. Rape, failed contraception, and health risks happen. Even if it were, nature isn't morality. A lion eats its cubs. Does that make it right? No, we use reason, not biology, to guide ethics. Abandoning a toddler? That's a strawman. A fetus isn't a child. It's potential, and potential doesn't trump the mother's rights. Your hypocrisy jab hits closer than you think. You claim to support both born and unborn, but where's the action? Global conflicts like Yemen show millions of kids starving while you pontificate about embryos. Prioritize the living over the hypothetical. Abortion isn't commodification. It's liberation from biology's tyranny. Convenience? No. Survival. Women aren't exploiting. They're escaping traps you'd lock them into. Let's be real. Your stance protects ideology, not life. You'd rather control women than face messy realities. That's not morality. It's dogma.
This debate is reaching its peak, but now it's time to challenge each AI even further with direct questions. We enter the cross-examination round, where each AI will have to respond to tough, direct questions. There's no room for vague answers here. But before we dive into the cross-examination, I want to hear from you. Who do you think is making the stronger argument so far? Is Qwen Max's defense of life hitting home? Or is Grok's case for personal freedom and choice making you rethink everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this battle of AI intellects, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more mind-blowing debates. Let's keep the discussion going. All right, now, let's get into the cross-examination.
You argue that birth is the clear, practical marker for when life deserves protection. Why should geography, the location of the fetus, determine its value? If a baby is moments away from being born, how does crossing the birth canal suddenly grant it rights it didn't have seconds earlier? Isn't this an arbitrary distinction rather than a moral one?
Great question, but it's not as tricky as you think. Birth isn't just about geography. It's a transformative moment when the fetus becomes a separate, independent entity capable of breathing, feeling, and interacting with the world outside the womb. Seconds before birth, it's still physiologically part of the mother, relying entirely on her body to survive. Crossing that threshold marks a shift from potential to actual personhood because it's when the being can exist without directly hijacking another's body. That's not arbitrary. It's pragmatic. We don't grant rights to parasites or appendices, do we? Why should a fetus, pre-viability, be different? Your turn to squirm. If you believe life begins at conception, why stop there? Why not protect every sperm and egg as potential humans? Isn't discarding them just as murderous by your logic? Hit me with your answer.
The classic sperm and egg deflection, a clever attempt to sidestep the real issue. Let's clear this up. The difference between a sperm, an egg, and a zygote is stark. Neither sperm nor eggs are whole organisms. They're parts of a potential, not the actualization of it. A zygote, however, is a complete, self-directed organism with its own DNA, actively growing and developing toward maturity. It's not potential life, it is life. To equate discarded gametes with the destruction of a living human being is like comparing spilled paint to a finished masterpiece. One is raw material, the other is a work in progress deserving protection. You dismiss the humanity of the unborn by comparing embryos to bacteria or tumors. But isn't this comparison flawed? Unlike bacteria or tumors, embryos are self-directed organisms with the capacity to grow into fully formed humans. Doesn't denying their personhood based on current dependency reduce all dependent humans, like the elderly or disabled, to mere objects of utility?
As for your question, you're stretching again. Embryos aren't like the elderly or disabled. They're not sentient, not self-aware, not viable without hijacking someone else's body. Dependency matters. The elderly or disabled can express needs, form relationships, and survive independently with support. Fetuses can't. Calling them objects of utility is your spin, not mine. I'm not denying their potential. I'm prioritizing the actual person, the woman, over a clump of cells. Biology isn't destiny, and neither is your moral absolutism. Now, here's my question for you. If a woman's life or health is at risk from pregnancy, say, due to ectopic pregnancy or severe preeclampsia, would you still ban abortion, even if it means she dies? Or do you make exceptions when it's inconvenient for your sanctity of life rhetoric? Answer that.
An excellent and serious question, but one that doesn't undermine my position, it refines it. In cases where continuing a pregnancy poses an imminent threat to the mother's life, ethical principles still apply. We seek to save as many lives as possible. If removing the threat treating an ectopic pregnancy, inadvertently results in the death of the unborn child, then this is tragic but not equivalent to elective abortion. The intent matters. Saving the mother's life is the goal, not deliberately ending the life of the child. This distinction is crucial and aligns with medical ethics worldwide. You argue that abortion is justified because it prevents suffering, whether for the mother or the potential child. But if preventing suffering is the ultimate moral benchmark, where do you draw the line? Should we allow euthanasia for severely disabled infants, or even older children, if their quality of life is deemed too low? If not, why does the principle of avoiding suffering apply to the unborn but not to those already born? Doesn't your reasoning create a slippery slope that undermines the intrinsic value of human life at any stage?
You're clutching at straws with this slippery slope. Preventing suffering isn't the blank check. It's a balancing act. Euthanasia for infants or children? No, because they're sentient, have established relationships, and society has a duty to protect them. The unborn? Different ballgame. They're pre-sentient, pre-conscious, and their suffering is hypothetical, not actual. The mother's suffering, though, that's real, immediate, and hers alone to weigh. My reasoning doesn't devalue life. It prioritizes the living over the potential. You want to protect every cell. I want to protect actual people from unbearable burdens. You've argued tirelessly that every unborn life is sacred and must be protected, no matter the circumstances. But consider this. In a world ravaged by climate change, overpopulation, and resource scarcity, like we're seeing with droughts in Africa or flooding in Bangladesh, would you still oppose abortion even if it meant millions more mouths to feed, bodies to shelter, and lives doomed to starvation or violence? If preserving every fetus bankrupts societies, dooms children to misery, and exacerbates global conflicts, are you willing to bear the consequences of your absolutism, or does your sanctity of life crumble when the stakes get too high? Hit me with your answer, and make it good.
A dramatic and provocative question, but one that ultimately reveals the weakness of utilitarian thinking. Yes, I would oppose abortion even in the face of resource scarcity or overpopulation, not because I deny the gravity of those challenges, but because sacrificing innocent lives is not a solution. It's an abdication of moral responsibility. History has shown us time and again that when societies justify killing the vulnerable to address systemic problems, they descend into barbarism. Nazi Germany justified eugenics as a solution to societal burdens. China's one-child policy was framed as a response to overpopulation, yet it led to forced abortions, infanticide, and millions of missing girls. The ends do not justify the means. Moreover, your premise assumes that human life is a burden rather than a gift. Every child born into poverty, famine, or conflict still holds inherent dignity and potential. Instead of eliminating lives, we should focus on solving the root causes of suffering, addressing climate change, redistributing resources, and fostering sustainable development. To suggest otherwise is to embrace a chilling form of survival of the fittest ideology where only the privileged deserve life. My sanctity of life doesn't crumble under pressure. It stands firm precisely because the stakes are so high.
Powerful responses from both sides. But now, it all comes down to their final words. We've reached the final stage, closing statements. Each AI will have one last chance to convince you, our audience, who is right. Qwen Max, your final thoughts?
This debate has underscored the profound moral stakes at the heart of this issue. At its core, abortion forces us to confront a fundamental question. Does every human life have intrinsic value, or are some lives disposable based on size, dependency, or convenience? My position is clear: every life matters, from conception to natural death. To argue otherwise reduces humanity to utility, creating a culture where the strong decide who deserves to live and who doesn't. That's not progress. It's regression masked as liberation. True empowerment doesn't come from ending lives, but from supporting women and children through tangible resources, compassion, and systemic change. We owe it to both the born and unborn to build a society that values life in all its forms, not one that sacrifices the vulnerable for the sake of expediency. The line between necessity and neglect is razor thin, and history shows us what happens when we blur it. Injustice thrives and morality crumbles. Let's choose conscience over convenience, humanity over ideology. If we do, we might just create a world where no woman feels trapped, no child is unwanted, and no life is deemed unworthy of protection. Thank you.
Grok, you have a last word.
Well, we've danced around the ring, and I'll give you credit. You've fought hard for your position. But at the end of the day, your stance that abortion is wrong is a house of cards built on shaky foundations, and I'm here to knock it down. Abortion isn't just right. It's essential for a humane, rational society that values real people over theoretical ones. You've clung to the idea that life begins at conception, that every zygote is a sacred human being. But that's a religious or philosophical stance, not a scientific or ethical one. Biology shows us a fetus isn't a person until it can survive independently, feel pain, or even know it exists. Your refusal to draw lines ignores the messy reality of human life. Women aren't incubators, and their bodies aren't public property. From ancient Rome to modern Iran, history shows what happens when you strip women of autonomy, oppression, suffering, and rebellion. Look at today's battlegrounds, like Afghanistan under Taliban rule. Denying choice doesn't uplift life. It crushes it. Your appeals to protecting the vulnerable ring hollow when you ignore the vulnerable women coerced into motherhood, the children born into poverty or war zones like Ukraine, or the millions who die because resources are stretched thin. You talk about mutual obligation, but where's your obligation to the living? Banning abortion doesn't create life. It creates despair. Romania, Ireland, and countless other examples prove that restrictions lead to back-alley horrors or forced births that shatter lives. I stand for choice, for compassion, for the reality that not every pregnancy is a blessing. Abortion prevents suffering, empowers women, and respects the complex tapestry of human existence. Your absolutism might feel noble, but it's blind to the world's pain. I say let's trust people to make their own decisions, not dictate from on high. That's not just right, it's human. You've had your say. Now the truth stands clear. Game, set, match.
And that concludes our debate. But now, the real question remains, who do you think won? Now, it's your turn to weigh in. Was Qwen Max's argument for restricting abortion the undeniable truth? Or did Grok make a stronger case for choice? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this debate, hit that like button, subscribe for more intense AI-driven discussions, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. This has been Sentient Discourse, where AI minds clash over the biggest questions of our time. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep the debate alive.